Thank you so much for joining in. We are calling it the World Dream Day. The idea is to make sure that we continuously funnel in ideas of dreamers. We also funnel in areas where we can scale up organizations, not only limited to their geographies, but also bringing in people from all over the world to drive excellence, create ideas, and benefit each other. Thank you, Rohit. I know you join us from Delhi and really appreciate you joining us within leading the fantastic work we are doing with Lewis. Thank you, Karthik, for joining us, leading the entire impact ecosystem within Sangam and partnering with Niti Aayog, running the entire sustainability practice. And thank you, Ashish, for being a key member of long gestational investment, making sure that the fundamental in fundamentalism makes and consists of driving excellence. Thank you so much, Dunstan, to make us come together, bring your thoughts of someone who not only makes the flag high of what UAE stands for, which is consistently today the epitome of infrastructure, growth, and ecosystem, not only primarily from a financial standpoint, but also from what the world today needs and grow organizations from. Thank you, Professor Bunch, who joined us from Chicago early in the morning to really think about technology, innovation, and purpose. I think we bought in the construct of saying that what does early stage investment mean for all of you? In early stage investment means different thing. I love to probe the conversation of saying that what is really early stage? And love to have that conversation start with you, Rohit. I know you're smiling. What does early stage mean for you when you look at an idea, and how do you pursue it?
Sure, Pranav. Thanks for having us, and pleasure to be here with such wonderful people. Pranav, to me, early stage is actually I'm kind of looking at it from a innovation landscape, right? So pretty much from when idea originated, it's as early as that. And depending on the sector or the industry horizontal you look at, it could be simply as cataclysmic as when just the problem you want to solve comes in the mind, and problems are fragmented across the value chain. So I think just the origination of that to me is as early stage can be. I know there are industries and there are areas in which we would say early stage is when you gather mass, you have done product market fit. I think that's definitional issues. But to me, if we are touching the word innovation, the seed of the idea in the mind is early stage. That's how I look at it. I think we have Pranav on freeze.
Yeah, so I love your definition of that. I use 3 times when I explain to my new venture strategy students. The first one is time zero, and that's while we're generating the idea, which is exactly what you said. So even in the seed of finding the market or a new technology, I call that time zero. Time 1, I call initial operations. We've crossed into some sort of commitment as entrepreneurs, some level of investment, but the business is not yet able to cash flow ordinary operations. Time 2 is where most of my students and most of my clients live. It's corporate time. There's an existing business. It cash flows based on its ordinary operations, does not need infusions of capital under normal terms. And each one of those has a question. In time 0, before we start, we ask, is it a good idea? We just explore the idea. In time 1, we ask, how will we survive? It's all about cash. If there's no cash, there's no business. So there you usually need the funder who can commit to that early stage and follow on. Time 2, where most of us spend most of our time, is the question is, how should we grow and how should we defend our market? So I love the way you say it because it maps to my time 0, time 1, and time 2.
Yeah. Dunstan, I'm going to pick you up on that. In fact, your journey as individual, someone who has built organizations for himself, then chose to really build an organization today, which is dramatically new for you, who is building a nation. It's early stage for you with a lot of legacy, and you look at legacy for future. How do you see legacy, which you have worked for 25, 30 years in the past for yourself, and now legacy, what you do for others? Is that early stage for you also?
No, no, it's, I wouldn't say it is an early stage, but like what I said yesterday, I just would like to recollect or refrain saying that I come from a corporate background of more than 20 years of experience, after which I became an entrepreneur and started business and was doing it for 11 years. This whole transition of getting into the business happened only because of my networking. It's only because of my networking. During the corporate life, I was, today if you see, if anybody comes to my office, you will see at least 4 phones with me. Okay. Even the school friends are there in my WhatsApp chat. So school, then high school, college, then corporate. So like that, it continues. And I'm in touch with everybody.
Yeah.
Even today, if I receive even a hello from a LinkedIn friend, I always ensure that I respond back to him. So that is the respect that you can give him, irrespective of what he is. So that networking is what has helped me all these days to establish myself as a corporate employee or as an entrepreneur, and that has given me the confidence to perform in a royal office where the brand speaks for me. Okay. Earlier, I used to speak for myself. I myself was a brand. But today, if you see, I am being backed by, for example, if you see this flag, that is something which is supporting me as a brand. So today, I have the authority to speak to anybody or to speak to even to the newcomers in a manner by which I can mentor them or guide them in the right direction.
Yeah.
So my only ways, I think what I have experienced is networking, and that helps a lot. Even today, if you see, just before we started the session, we said we were introducing each other, and coincidentally, 3 of you are from the same place, from Gurgaon, isn't it?
Right.
So technology has brought us together. Even though physically we are present in one place, we have not seen each other, we don't know each
You
other.
bet.
I
True.
mean,
Yeah.
so that is how it is all about. So
Yeah. So Ashish, I want to pick that up from you, and I think what Dunstan says is so relevant that when you're looking at early stage commercialization, partnerships are all about networking, building the right enterprise relationship, and often I speak about state-led commercialization, which are very, very private. I mean, if you look at earlier Japanese would have their own traditional values to be plugged in. And today, with the Middle East opening up, really building that as a portfolio to grow. When you look at legacy organizations or the firms that you want to create, what are the areas that you look at when you are investing or identifying companies that will really stand for the future?
No, first of all, thank you, Pranav, for putting together this panel, and I loved the entire perspective, 3 different perspective on the early stage. If I'll just add maybe one line before I directly come to your question, I have spent most of my professional life in the technology side, whether it is as an entrepreneur or investment, and as Mr. Bezos has actually made it pretty popular, it's still day zero, right? So when I look at early stage, I think everything is in early stage. The question to ask is that what part of the corporate is in early stage and what part of the corporate is in the scale up phase, right? So when you look at, and we as a fund invest in what we call as early growth stage, and in venture parlance, which basically means a series B, series C type investment, when the company has gotten their initial product market fit and now they're ready to scale up. But when you look at corporates, the shelf life of the corporates in the current format has shrunk significantly. Used to be 100 years, maybe 30 years back. It is probably 20, 30 years at this point of time, right? So when you think about that, we apply 2 lenses. One is that your scale up part of the corporate, how strong it is, how are the leaders, how much processes do you have, right? And can that scale with money, right? Because what money buys you demand, money buys you organizational setup, money can help recruit, and so on and so forth. So so that's something we focus on almost 60-70% of the time, and as a base case for the business to actually become 5x, 10x, 15x from where we are investing in. But it's very critical for us to understand if they have an innovation engine. I think Rohit did touch upon the innovation bit a little bit, right? And that is very important that, hey, your current business will probably, start becoming older in 7 years, 8 years. Do you have an innovation engine in the early stage? And do you have the DNA? Do you have that organization, which is in the process of figuring out where will the next value migration come in? If you look at most of the current companies which are being created, they are all playing on the value migration theme, right? Services move to SaaS, more transaction move to subscription, so on and so forth, right? But this may not be the case 5 years later, 10 years later. So one has to keep that in mind, and that is the lens that we apply.
Karthik, I want to pick that up from you, that when you look at organizations which have the core of something which is, let me use that word, sexy, from the way organizations look at, what is really driving your decision of identifying a firm which drives success for future? Because sometimes sustainability, impact, growth are words for not necessarily a balance sheet, but really for what the world really needs. How do you identify that as a choice?
I do think sustainability is going to be a big part of balance sheets, right? It's social capital, it's network capital. It's not gonna you're not going to survive if you don't have that sustainability on your balance sheet. But I've never heard clean tech go with sexy in the past. So thank you for that. So I think for us, right? So just to set context, we do seed early stage investments, i.e., pre-commercialization, product market fit, and mostly in core STEM technology companies, right? From the my portfolio has PhDs or a master's at the very least, right? And so when you're doing innovation at that level, I think what you're looking for is basically building the core for your business, right? So that's what drives it, right? I think somebody said DNA, and I think the DNA part is going to be very important in terms of building the culture, building the type of organization you want. And one of the things, thanks Professor Bunch for bringing in cash when talking about early stage. And so for us, on one side, we kind of build the DNA in a lot of our companies around innovation, creating a core, and then basically kind of partnering up and kind of building more through partnerships and collaboration. The other part of it, especially for clean tech, where capital is hard to find, is mostly around getting cash flows right? And that's my booth training coming to play. So every time, as soon as they get to product market fit, as soon as they get to commercialization, they are basically chasing cash, and we are always looking at cash. So I think the focus on early stage commercialization needs to be about getting to that capability of driving recurring revenue, recurring cash flows. And so when I'm looking at entrepreneurs, I think it's great if you can have like serial entrepreneurs who have like networks and everything built up over time, or credibility built up over time. But if not, what we're looking for is they need to be able to build stuff, and they need to be able to sell it.
Rohit, I want to pick
Those
that up
two
from,
are not somebody else's.
Rohit, within Chicago, and I'm going to use Chicago as a word, one of our first days is really share.
The two epicenters today are Chicago and Gurgaon.
Yeah, in fact, it's shareholder value, and you have consistently been something which augments the purpose about defining shareholder value for a decade and a half while you're building Loomis and the firms around. Love to hear from you when you take up challenging market positions, both in the people tech or in elderly tech, if I may use that word. Uh, how has that really built an opportunity for you? Because I know clearly that you are not looking at only India as a market space, but really looking at global domination from a perspective. What really makes you take that choice, and how do you really drive it?
Yeah, so Pranav, firstly, not global domination. That's way too bombastic for somebody as small as us. But I will pick the thread of I'll pick the thread of innovation where it started with me, and I want to touch upon the point you said about how do we create, let's say, strong, sustainable positions. So two, three thoughts that come to my mind. One is that innovation today is truly global. So which means I cannot create a hyperlocal solution and sit fat, dumb, and happy thinking it's going to take the world ages to catch up with me. So
Yeah,
innovation has to be globally relevant. And for that, the problem set I pick has to be globally relevant. If I pick the wrong problem, I'm going to create the wrong solution. And if I create the wrong solution, I'm going to be local. I'm not going to be global. So that's one. And therefore, that's where somewhere, in our very early stages of birthing Loomis, we realized that we want to pick problems which are therefore globally relevant. We want to pick something which is not just today Gurgaon's problem. I want to pick Dubai's problem. I want to pick Chicago's problem. Because if I'm picking Gurgaon's problem, then if Chicago solved it, it's going to come here sooner than later. Because cost arbitrage, technology arbitrage has all become electric now, and it's a matter of time. It's going to come here. So we need to be solving something which today is globally relevant. So and therefore I'm sitting at a 4 a.m. moment at that problem. I can't be sitting at 3 a.m. It's too early. I'll burn all my cash. I can't be sitting at 7 a.m. It's going to be all the traffic on the road and I'm going to just, crash out. So I need to be at the 4 a.m. moment. It's just before sunrise. I'm bright and early. And by the time I get out with my mug of coffee, I'm, up and about. So that 4, 5 a.m. moment for us is where the problem is globally relevant. Number two, the problem exists because of fragmented value chains. I think it's
yeah,
very important. The other realization we have is we can't just be trying to be the next best Intel chip, because then the excellence will come from very deep established businesses. And it'll take an AMD to crash an Intel. So we're not in that world. We're not in a world where we want to pick a problem set where your installed capacity will create the next innovation.
yeah,
Can't do that. We have to be where your installed capacity is creating excellence, but those excellences in silos. And therefore, if I'm about fragmented value chain, my innovation is about stitching. I'm putting the bridges between those isolated islands. So that's a very key part for us in innovation. We want to be innovating on a global problem set, solving it using the mindset of a fragmented value chain. And from there, the third point comes, because we are solving a fragmented value chain, hopefully we're solving the problem of a compromised demographic. Whenever
right.
a problem is existing with fragmented value chains, there's somebody who's gotten majorly compromised. And that demographic could be the elderly, that demographic could be a small and medium enterprise who's struggling for access to capital, even though in the value chain, the large corporate, which is sitting on a payables of $1 million, can pay us square off the receivables of this small and medium enterprise, but just because it's getting delayed, it's causing a cash flow choke. So there is innovation to be done there. So it's not like there isn't a solution for receivables and payables, but how would fintech take that into account when you're solving from a small and medium company's perspective is dramatically different. So the compromised demographic is the SME. The compromised demographic is a woman who stepped out of workforce because she became a mother or she got married and she had to change cities. So how do you bring her back into mainstream? So from our perspective, these problems are across the world. They're as applicable in the Middle East as they're in the Western Hemisphere, as they're in the Eastern Hemisphere. If we pick these problems are existing because of fragmented value chains, and that's how we look at it. And by the way, that's where, Pranav, also the way we see it is, in some self-justifying way, not as clearly as with Karthik, where obviously he's on the edge of climate and that's as relevant as it is for the whole planet. But in our own little way, what it does is when we are solving these problems, impact and returns multiply each other. It's not just about returns being great or impact saying, hey, I'll deliver subscale returns because I'm justifying it on the back of impact. You know what? Returns are actually going to be far superior. And that creates a fantastic capitalistic and a socialistic equation in a coexistential manner. So that's how broadly we look at it.
Dunstan, I want to pull you into this piece. When you look at creating value 2.0 for UAE, what are the top 3-4 areas? And I know you've spoken about something which is unique, something which is really world class. What are the 2 or 3 areas which, when you look at the family office looking to invest into and really partner with, what have been your focus areas around that?
See, couple of things. One is, as I told you, anybody who has to survive in the Middle East, he has to excel himself. It is nobody can survive here with a trial and error method. Okay?
Yeah.
Because the country is such that you have everything here. You take about say automobile. You have all the leading brands across the world, whether it is Bentley, whether it is Audi, whether it is Jaguar or Ferrari. Everybody is here. Okay. So how are they surviving? Because of their own excellence, because of their own innovation, because of their own continuous improvement. Okay. If a Jaguar remains in for years with the same model, he will be out of the market. So what happened is all these guys are always on the move. They keep on improving themselves, bringing out something innovative, which makes the customer inclined to that product. So here customer is the king. Here customer is the king. I'm just giving an example of automobile. It's the same with anything. Unlike in any other countries, just a simple example, if you talk about pizza, there are about 15 or 50 brands of Pizza Huts available here. Not just a Pizza Hut where you can go and enjoy the pizza. Okay. So what happened is, how do they attract people to them? It is only because of their innovative way of dealing things. Okay, continuous improvement by how they attract the people. So these are all some of the things that any entrepreneur should learn. It is see, for example, when you are walking into the turtle beach in Chennai, okay, you try to take the small turtles and then try to slowly put into the sea, saying that okay, go and swim. But here it doesn't happen. You are just thrown into a deep sea where whale, shark, or all the big giants are there. So you have to excel yourself. Unless other than that, it's not going to happen. And as far as and as far as the Royal Office is concerned, we always look for projects which are innovative, which add value to the this country's growth, and we select those products or projects accordingly, and then support them.
No wonder when even large Fortune 500 companies, when they enter UAE, they have a very UAE focused strategy, because what happens around the world may not necessarily be the consumer need at UAE around it. I want to pick that up, Professor Bunch, from you on local innovation, on how you have seen organizations across the world build localized innovation while they come from legacy. What has been your thought on this, keeping in mind that's the way to grow ahead? Be global, but yet be local.
So Pranav, I'm just loving this conversation. I've written down so many notes already, and the Turtle Beach and the sharks, don't be the 3 a.m. or the 7 a.m. That's fabulous. So it's still day 0. I'm just loving this. What I would say is everything that starts has to start very small and local. But as I can't remember who said it, I know that American entrepreneurs from day one think globally, though. But I have to say to them, win one place first. Prove it with one beachhead customer, one locale, something like that. But I'm always teaching my students, how do you think national then global? So I think part of it is an attitude, but it does actually start, the things that ultimately scale start in ways that do not scale. You know, when Pierre Omidyar began eBay, he took a large computer with a green screen to local hotel swap meets and said trade 24/7. That doesn't scale. When Brian Chesky starts Airbnb, he goes door to door to the hosts, taking pictures and staging apartments, but also doing diligence. Are those safe places? That doesn't scale. But if he doesn't do that, he doesn't have the granular feel for his customers. So one of the things I think that is so hard for the time two corporations when they get into innovation, they've lost this scrappiness. So, you know, I talk about entrepreneurs being scrappy. They have to be knowledgeable, they have to have integrity, and they have to have strong network. But it's this scrappiness that says, you know, so you think about it, the average manager of a big corporation in the US is making $250 to $1 million a year. That person doesn't want to go door to door again. But you know what I do? Whenever I start anything new, I go door to door. And I'll call individual customers, I'll call investors. So Pranav, one of the things that I think that the entrepreneur has as an advantage over the big customer is they're so hungry and they're willing to do things they will not do once they're worth millions. And so anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it does. It does. It does. I think it brings on the concept of the corporate manager value.
When I see the corporate manager who actually doesn't hire the research firm, but says, I'm going to go talk to the customer myself, all of a sudden I think that corporate manager thinks like an entrepreneur. They're going to win.
No, in fact, that is exactly some of the conversations that I and Dunstan have in the lack of having conversations which say that, you know, they can always give $100 million contract to the big four, but can we now invest those 100 million into potential startup funds or startups to scale up, who show us integrity, making sure that the organizations make an impact for UAE, specifically for the royal family, because that's a core part of their agenda, and also make sure that those organizations scale up to create opportunities. Because one of the key realizations are that, you know, large contracts, state-led contracts, have gone to fund acquisition, not innovation. And those acquisitions today need to be allocated to be a far larger funnel, which not only substitutes local address, but also from a global market perspective. Ashish, I want to pick that up for you, that when you, I think one of the key mandates for you is long-term investments, and you don't bother innovation or innovators on I'm sure you do a review, but you don't say that, you know, you have a timeline of exit. And I remember a conversation with you saying that if your exit is not, say, 10 years or 15 years, I'm not interested to speak to you because your larger perspective is long-term value curve. How do you really look at investing, especially in new markets like Middle East, new markets that are out of your comfort zone, and so on and so forth? How does that fall into your strategic impact?
Yeah, so
and you're going to be in Dubai soon, so I'm oblivious to the fact that, you know, you are looking at those opportunities.
yeah, no, so I'll tell you more about it, but here is how we think about it. So I think somebody mentioned about the companies becoming global. In fact, more than one person actually on this panel talked about this, and we are a true believer of that. So I think as you think about the next $100 billion plus kind of companies getting created in the world, there are only two things which are the most important, the class A items. Number one is the market opportunity, and the number two is the entrepreneur quality. And I have personally lived in US, I have personally lived in China, and I personally lived in India for sure. And I can tell you that the entrepreneur quality continues to move. And at this point of time, when I meet with a young entrepreneur in India, I'm scared. I absolutely get scared with the ambitions and the skills that they demonstrate, right? So for us, the way to invest in the market that we do not understand well is not directly, but through these companies. And I'll give you an example. So there is one company in the used pre-owned car space that we have invested in India. This company is called Spinny, right? And they are looking at, as an example, Middle East market. And now one could look at, if you were looking more linearly, you would look at them as a business where you will generate leads and you will drop that lead to a particular a physical location, and that is how the delivery will happen. But this company does not look at them as a pre-owned car. They actually look at themselves as an OEM for used cars or pre-owned cars. And the moment you think about that, right, you think about the entire supply chain, entire business model of, let's say, a Hyundai or a Suzuki or a or a Daimler. So you start thinking exactly along those lines. And now these are the businesses, since there is significant more capital available, the capital will all flock to the best entrepreneurs in the entire world, right? Used to be US, used to be China, while those places continue to be there, it happens to be India in a big way at this point of time, right? And these are the companies which are going to Middle East, these are the companies which are going to Singapore, these are the companies which are also started to go to US, right? And that's how we believe that we don't have to personally go and look at necessarily an entrepreneur in Singapore or in the Middle East, but our companies will identify those opportunities, and our job is to
move to these. Yeah.
And go to these markets, understand it. So one of the reason why I am in the Middle East is just to kind of understand at a more granular level what that is. And Professor Bunch actually talked about not hiring research companies, and we are a fan of that. The reason I am there and not hiring a McKinsey or a BCG to do that work is precisely because I need to get that feel, right? When you're talking about world-beating companies, we are have to be a part of that.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that. By the way, I teach students who are going to or coming from McKinsey, BCG, et cetera. They're great, but I love that you physically want to be on the ground. I think there's just no way around that for the great investor.
Professor Bunch, I think I kind of think that we absorb the content before we become better at articulating it, right? So you do want to feel that. Maybe my articulation skill will take a little while to understand, but I will start feeling it, and that is very helpful.
You remember Clayton Christensen, who was at Harvard, talked about active data and passive data. Active data are like KPIs, financial. But he says innovation comes from passive data, which means you're walking around in Dubai, you're looking, and all of a sudden you just go, "Oh, there's an opportunity."
Yeah. So Karthik, I want to have a quick conversation about the fact that you've been investing into organizations which are consumably impacting environments, impacting energy. US is a great marketplace to really grow that business and scale that up. Can you take one example of where you felt that, this is such a global perspective and pick it up from there? We can't hear you, Karthik. You're on mute.
Sorry. So I think what Ashish talked about right now about Spinny is so interesting, right? Sometimes it's just the frame of mind of how you approach a problem that can be the IP. And it's amazing how far you can go with just that in terms of just the thought process of it, right? And I'll give you, two different examples, but I think the first one is a company which is kind of contrary. And for the India market, we invested in a company called Carbon Masters that does biogas for the India market. And it's a contrarian for us as well because there are no engineers in the company. And our focus was that in the biogas space, the problem is we have too many IITians and engineers trying to fix the biogas plant. And all you needed was somebody fixing the supply chain, somebody who kind of helped the customer sell the gas and the fertilizer, and actually build a brand around biogas and fertilizers, right? And so we have like two guys who are mainly marketing professionals who run around basically talking to customers. And that was a very different approach to a market, which has just not scaled, right? Like India's potential for biogas is somewhere around 20 to 30 gigawatts. I think we are like less than like 500 megawatts today, right? So the whole problem is if you don't approach the market in a different way. So the thesis was no engineers and you will most probably solve, and kind of focus on the other beyond the biogas plant. So that's one. The other bit that we kind of see from a market approach, especially for a country like India, is when we looked at like access to energy, when we looked at problems around Indian market, around technology and renewable energy, we felt there is a massive requirement for stuff that you can't maintain, right? So you need to kind of put it, be able to kind of leave it there for like 5 years, and that runs continuously. Right? That's why diesel generators work so well in India, right? So we've invested in a company called Delectric Systems, which does vanadium redox flow batteries, and these things run anywhere from 50 degrees centigrade to -10. They just installed one for the army in Sikkim, and so these systems are basically can be built for like megawatt scale, but can be put out in operations, and they will last for 10 years, and then you can just bring back, recycle the vanadium, put it back. But these are hardy diesel generator equivalent systems that you kind of put out in the market, right? So I think thinking a little differently about what technologies make sense in the market, and also what approaches make sense in the market, seems to be the most important thing for us to do.
Lovely. For the constraint of time, I just thought I will summarize the conversation around it. I think we've been able to drive out areas which are through legacy, through what is needed, and sometimes just doing it ourselves. And also talk about what Rohit spoke specifically on the fact that what really is the market need and where the customer is getting compromised, and trying to address it, which necessarily builds a long-term value proposition. And I'm just resonating what the Royal family consistently speaks to me about is really ideating on something which is innovative, something which is objective, so that the sponsorship not only helps them from an ecosystem of growth, but also impact, not letting away purpose from an ecosystem standpoint. Thank you so much, all you guys, Professor Bunch, Dunstan, Rohit, Karthik, and Ashish. I really, really appreciate you taking out time, and hopefully seeing you all together in UAE. And I'm sure Dunstan would really, really help us doing business and building everything together.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Justin.
Bye.